Hello, Dental Team listeners. This is Kiera, and today I'm excited to welcome back a popular guest. He and I have chatted multiple times. We've gone around and around on different topics of how to help dentists build more wealth. So Derick with Big Life Financial, we talked about research and development credits. Today we're going to be talking about this big, beautiful tax bill, how that's going to impact dentists, how it's going to impact building wealth. I do think it also impacts team members. So Derick, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
I'm great, Kiera. I really appreciate you bringing me on the show again. It's always fun to talk.
Of course. We all know that I love wealth strategies. I love it takes time, like you and I were talking about pre-show. I think it's something to educate ourselves on and to be around really smart people and to constantly be looking at different things. Like I know hot in the real estate world right now, and with buying businesses and buying practices, the big, beautiful tax bill is actually great for the bonus depreciation coming in. So just like educating ourselves. And that's what I wanted today to be, not getting high into politics. These are bills that are into place, and how to take advantage of them, how to maximize them. Derick, you work with a ton of dentists. So Derick, for those who don't know you, kind of give a little bit background on how you and I even got connected, how you got into dentistry, how does Big Life Financial play into this? We have a lot of mutual clients together. So just kind of give people a background on who you are and how you got to the dental space.
Absolutely. You know, I started out back in like 2009, 2010, helping small business owners with taxes and financial strategy. I was working for another firm at the time, and I had been a house flipper. And if for those of you who remember, 2008 wasn't so good if you're a house flipper, right? And when that whole thing fell apart, kind of fell on my head, I took a lot of the skills that I had, and a friend of mine hired me to help small business owners with taxes and financial and business strategy. Working with them, I had a chance to work with about 1,500 business owners over 7 years. And then eventually went out and started doing my own things because there were some different things that I wanted to do that they didn't offer. And essentially, in that time, I worked with a lot of dentists and a lot of doctors. And so I kind of stayed in that arena, which led me to meeting you, Kiera, through Mark over at DSI and all the stuff that I'd done with him, and then found you guys and just love what you guys do with helping people to build their teams, because I'm such a huge advocate of how important that is to have the right team to run your practice, right? Especially if you're going to have multiple practices. It just can't be about you. And so it was just kind of a natural fit. And like you said, you definitely love financial strategies. So we got into it. We talked about a bunch of different things, had a chance to work together. Like you said, have shared a lot of clients along the way, but it just seems like dentists have a lot of the problems that we solve, which is they pay a lot of taxes, they make good money, and most of them didn't get an MBA in college to understand how business and finances work. They've had to learn along the way. And so we see ourselves as part of that process of helping dentists become better business owners, better entrepreneurs, and honestly create freedom in their life instead of just having a business that runs them, because it's easy to have that happen in dentistry. So that's sort of how we got connected. So I don't know, over the last, since whatever 2008, 2009 was, last 15 plus years, I've probably worked with somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 business owners. I would say a good chunk of those have been dentists. So that's how we ended up together.
Yeah, I love the journey. I love hearing what you've done. I also agree on like building wealth. And I think going through dental school, working at the dental college, dentists are coming out with, upwards of $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 in debt, somewhere up towards that upper million. Midwestern was a very expensive school. So looking at that and then watching offices. And I remember the first dentist that I worked with, and we were partners. I called her 2.5 because we were 2.5 million in debt. And I would always be like, you better straighten that spine, 2.5. Like we need that spine for a long time. But it was something where I realized like, that's a substantial amount of debt. One, to walk out of school with. Two, you buy a practice on top of that. And then you want to try and like even remotely live your own personal life. It just felt like the odds are possibly stacked not in a dentist's favor. I've had several dentists where this is the case, where they're multi-million in debt, trying to get these practices off the ground. And so really coming up with like, yes, long-term, If they make it, awesome. Hopefully it will pay off for them. But what are maybe some strategies and tips that they can do now? I think like so many of us look at real estate and wish that we would have gotten in at the 2008 because now you're selling them out, or even in 2020. And so it's like, what can people do now, even if they didn't maximize or we didn't buy practices back in the day when they were so cheap, they were pennies on the dollar. What things can we do now to maximize? I was even talking to this girl the other day, and she's like, oh yeah, my baby was born on New Year's Eve. And I was like, wow, talk about a great tax write-off. And she's like, I didn't even know that that was a tax write. Like I didn't even know the benefits of things. And so I feel like just so many little pieces that could make us smarter business owners to I'm here. I love living in the United States. I love paying taxes for the country that we get to live in. I love the
Right.
opportunity that we have to be business owners. With that said, I also think it's smart for us to be very wise stewards over our money, to figure out different strategies. And no, it's not sexy. No, it's not fun. A lot of it is just like save, like invest, do the things you're supposed to do. And it's going to be part of, what is it, like the eighth wonder of the world of compound interest. Like there are
Sure.
other pieces, but Derick, like, let's talk about this big, beautiful tax bill. How does this work? How does this impact business owners? What are some of the benefits we can take care of? Now we're talking in 2025, things will change and shift as the landscape shifts, but knowing that's in place, what are some of the things dentist owners can do now to maximize that coming out?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Kiera. It's not that this stuff happens overnight, but it's systemic, right? You're doing it day in and day out. And taxes is one of those things, whether you like it or not, you have to file them every year. And I'm
Right.
not going to lie to you, that's part of what I like about being in the tax world is people have to do it every year. It's a pretty good business model that way,
I
right?
was going to say, you've got the reoccurring opportunities because it has to happen every year, just like dentists have pro fees every 6 months. I mean, it's a great built-in business. I mean,
Yeah.
kudos to you. I don't enjoy it, but it is a necessary evil to be done.
I totally get that. If you would have told me you're going to work in taxes even 15 years ago when I first got into it, I would have said absolutely not interested. But what I can tell you is every dollar you make in taxes is the same as a new dollar you make in your business, right? But you don't have to have employees and risk and additional insurance and additional equipment and all this other stuff. So it really is pure profit when you can reduce your taxes. So even a small amount of tax strategy can go a very long way in increasing what you get in the bottom line, right? And if you could just take a lot of dentists across the country, they're in the 40% tax bracket, maybe a little higher or lower depending on your state, but somewhere in that range. If you could even lower that by 10%, that's keeping an additional 10% of your income. That's a lot of extra money for people to be able to save and put to work without having to go do more risk and buy a bigger building and do a build out and deal with more personalities in the office, because all of those things are variables, right? So I see it as a pure profit machine if you get it right. And so I've chosen to think it that way because I spend so much time in it. But it really does come down to just keeping a lot more of the money you make. And it's a very potent way to do it because honestly, with 10 to 15 hours a year, so think of that as like 1 hour a month, you can really add a lot to the bottom line of what you get to keep. In some cases, we can cut taxes almost in half for high income earners. So it's a pretty big deal.
Well, and as you said that, I think it's a big deal for today because yes, to have that back to you is great. But like we talked about compounding until you've experienced compounding seems like not real.
Yeah.
Just like I think when like you haven't bought your first house and it's like, how am I ever supposed to do this and make money on it until you bought your first practice? A lot of those things I think feel arbitrary. They feel false. And then once you get into the compounding world and you're like, oh my gosh, like we're making money without having to do anything. It's like, yeah, if I could save on my taxes in a legal, ethical way,
Yep.
have more money at the end of the year that I could then put towards this, like you said, make it work for me. Well, now that it's just duplicating, it's multiplying, it's replicating, those things to me are things I get excited about. Those are things that I look for because I don't think there's a lot of money. I call it like the money making machine. Like what things can we put into your money making machine to where it's working for you day in, day out without you having to do any extra work? I think all of us like check yes. Let's say yes to that. So
Yep.
Derick, let's talk about how we can create more of these money making machines working, putting our money to work for us rather than constantly trying to like chase the money dream to where at the end of our careers and even during our careers, we're living the lives that we wanted to get to when we first started out into these careers.
Yeah. And I can tell you guys this, if you only walk away with one thing, it's the idea, if you want to build wealth, you need to create systematic savings, right? Systematize putting money aside, whether that's actually savings account or investing or however, but just getting money out of the spending cycle and into the building cycle. And it's like watching your child, right? Like in the beginning, kids grow and it's like day to day, you don't see it. But year to year, it starts to make a bigger and bigger and bigger difference. And then, when they're teenagers, you're just like, what's happening, right? So it's the same kind of thing with your money. In the beginning, if you're just watching it day to day, you don't really see the growth. You have to trust the process, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
biggest thing you can do is put that on autopilot, because if you have to automatically go into your bank account every month and move money over, or every year move money over, it's much harder. And like writing 25, 50, 100, $200,000 checks feels hard. Setting
Mm-hmm.
aside 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, $10,000 a month, and then you cut that in half per pay period, and all of a sudden it gets a lot easier. It's like, oh yeah, $1,000 a pay period, not that big a deal. Much easier than writing a $25,000 check, right? Or $2,000 or $3,000 per pay period. It really does add up, and that's where the tax piece comes in. Is in many cases it's like found money. If I try to teach our clients to save like you're going to pay full blast on taxes, and
Yep.
then when we do the tax strategy, all this money's left over. And so it feels like extra money. And then you can put it to work, right? And that's where you do get to play with some bigger chunks.
Mm-hmm.
But really it's that habit of automating setting money aside. If you can just only take one thing from this, it's that. And taxes can create a huge amount of that for you along the way. So let's talk about the tax bill, right?
Yeah, let's talk about it. And I just want to highlight on that, Derick, of I was talking to a CPA the other day on the podcast, and he talked about how like there's a different psychology of business owners. We go
Mm-hmm.
from getting a W-2 paycheck that we're used to being able to spend all of it because taxes have already been taken out, to then becoming business owners and not having taxes automatically taken from that, and needing to be super disciplined on saving. And so I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you. And when I realized like I got so annoyed when I'm like, oh, great. So now I never get a refund check ever again in taxes. I was like, no, actually, it's actually so much better now than it ever was. Because if I just set it aside, I'm like, taxes are pretty simple. Like, yes, there's some nuances to them, but it's pretty much like whatever tax bracket you are, take your profit at the end of the month, set that aside. And lo and behold, if you do the tax planning strategy, like you said, usually I'm ending up with a pretty good substantial chunk at the end of the year that I count as my like quote unquote like the refund check or whatever they I don't even know.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I've gotten one that I don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
Uh but it's awesome because then you have this huge lump of money because you've been saving it. You weren't
Mm-hmm.
expecting it. All your expenses in your life is taken care of, to where now, like you said, it is really fun of, is that an investment? Is that buying something that I've always wanted to get? Is that real estate money? Because the amount of cash, if you are strategic in how you do it, is exponentially substantial. It is truly life changing. So I'm excited, Derick. Let's talk about the tax bill, but I will second you and ditto you and just say, yes, there's discipline to it, but that discipline equals so much freedom on the other side that just try it. Trust us on this. Save, learn to save on it, and be blown away at how much you're able to have at the end of the year if you do it really well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I love your approach, Kiera. That's exactly what we try to teach with people. So let's talk about the tax bill, right?
Okay,
There's
let's
a ton of
talk.
stuff that's in there that we're not going to touch on because it like did the child tax credit go up $200 a year? Yes. Is that going to move the needle for you as a business owner?
No.
Not really. Right. Is there a little bit for senior tax relief in there where there's $6,000 of income that they don't pay taxes on? Yes. Does that really matter for you? Probably not. Right. So we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of key things that can really move the needle. One of them you alluded to, Kiera, that I think is really important is the idea of bonus depreciation, right? People who
Mm-hmm.
don't know what bonus depreciation is, it's when you buy certain types of equipment or real estate, you can take all the depreciation in the first year, right? And that can be a huge chunk, especially when you combine it with something like cost segregation. For those of you who don't know what cost segregation is, the two really work well together. So I think it's worth taking just a sec, even though it's not new, it really enhances this strategy. Cost segregation is when you have a piece of real estate, you bring in an engineer, and there are companies that do this, right? So you don't have to know all this stuff. But they come in, they reclassify as much of your building as they can as equipment. And so what you get to do is depreciate a portion of the building, the stuff that's equipment, much more rapidly. So a lot of times 5, 7, or 15 years versus, either 27 or 39 and a half years. So you get a lot more depreciation on the front end. It's not like you get more overall, but money today is worth a whole lot more
Mm-hmm.
than money 20 or 30 years from now, right? You can
Right.
invest it and use it to grow your business, et cetera. But then when you add bonus depreciation to that, you can get a lot more of it in the first year. So what this really means is if you're buying the right kind of equipment, or you're buying a building, or you're doing big improvements, you can get a lot more depreciation, and that depreciation can save you in taxes, right? And this is one that I feel like most CPAs kind of get bonus depreciation, but a lot of them don't bring in the cost segregation piece. So if you own a
Mm-hmm.
piece of real estate, especially if you bought it in the last few years and you haven't done a cost segregation study, this is something that you would have to know about because someone has to physically come to your building. If you haven't done one, you should talk to your CPA about it or talk to someone about it. I'm sure Kiera knows people. We know people. There are plenty of people out there who do it. But that's something worth looking at, especially if your building's worth, I would say, $250,000, $300,000,
I
and
agree.
you've had it less than 5 years and you haven't done this. Yeah, it's totally worth looking at. It could be a real nice windfall. So that's a big one. It had been in place, then it started phasing out from 100% to 80% to 60%, but now we're back at 100%. So this is a big one, especially if you own your building or you're buying a lot of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another really big one is the salt tax. Now, people hear salt tax and they're like, what? They're thinking of like the spice, right? Salt stands for state and local tax. And really, to simplify this, and there's kind of a workaround in almost every state where you can do it as a pass through setup. And essentially, what that means is if you pay all your state taxes before the end of the year, those state taxes become a write off for your federal taxes. Now, this was in place up to $10,000. So if you were in a 40% tax bracket, it could have saved you $4,000. Now it's up to $40,000. So if you're making a lot of money or you're in a high tax state, you can pay those state taxes before the end of the year and it creates a federal tax write off. And so like if you were in a, paying in a 32% tax bracket and you paid $40,000, it's going to save you, between $12,000 and $13,000 in taxes that year, which is pretty significant for found money. All it has to be done is you have to pay those taxes, and then your CPA or your tax pro has to claim that, right? So that's another
Mm-hmm.
big one that got raised, and you probably heard a lot about it in the news because people were trying to get it raised higher, and some people thought it should be lower. It really does favor business owners. It's not something a person who doesn't have a business can do, and that was part of the controversy, right? But at the end of the day, it's law, so you should be taking full advantage of that.
I feel like that definitely impacts like the high state tax states like California, New York, like some of those bigger ones.
Yep.
Definitely because I live in Nevada. It's a no state income tax state. So if I understand correctly, Derick, and this is where I love bringing smart people on, the salt tax doesn't apply to me per se in Nevada because we don't have state income tax. Is that correct? But in those higher ones, it definitely helps you out tremendously by being able to take those credits and apply them.
That is correct. Yeah. And like another really high one is Oregon. They have quite
Mm-hmm.
high state tax, whereas Washington has none. So, yeah, that doesn't apply to everybody. But if you're in a state that has even medium, like I'm in Utah, you know, income tax there's right around 5% for the state. Like it's still significant, right? You can
I
still
agree.
do up to the same amount. You'll just get there slower than if you're in California. So,
Right.
once again, just one of those things like you talked about, having kids or, having the ADA, like disability access to your building, or a lot of these other things that like there are a bunch of little things, but they really do add up. Doing the Augusta
Mm-hmm.
rule, I'm sure you guys have talked about a million times, and paying your kids properly. And we have a whole strategy of actually how to help people use tax strategy to pay for their kids' college, which is a pretty cool one.
Yeah.
Using some of that, but those aren't part of the tax bill, so we won't dig into that today.
But
Uh,
they are smart things to know because as you're listing it off, I think when someone's making, let's say your practice is doing 1 million, let's say it's doing 2 million, 5 million, let's say you're at a
Mm-hmm.
50% overhead, let's just do 5 million, that's 2.5 mil. Not all of that's going to come to you as profit, but let's use like it also could be coming to you as profit, even if it's in the form of distributions and different pieces. So I'm like, on that 2.5, if that's your taxable income, now let's just do, let's say you're in the highest, like that would put you in the highest tax bracket. So we're
Mm-hmm.
at a 37%. Like that's almost $1 million worth of tax money right there
Mm-hmm.
on 2.5. So I understand that, say, 12 grand doesn't seem like that much, but I'm like, but 12 grand is still going to chip down this tax bill. And then you do another 20 grand here, then you do another 15 grand here. All of that does exponentially chip down, and like the bonus depreciation. That's why I think, Derick, you're talking like the $200 on 1 million of taxes, not really going to move the needle. But 12 grand, 15 grand, it's the stacking and being able to keep that money. You have to pay this tax no matter what. And why not like benefit and minimize and reduce it and keep that money? And then, even worst case scenario, you even go invest it, or you put it somewhere like a high yield savings account that's still making 4% for you that you wouldn't have been making. So that money's working for you. I think it's a no brainer, no matter what tax bracket you're in, just to see. But like, I also think this is where I don't like to get lazy on my taxes and be like, oh, is it
Mm-hmm.
really worth doing the Augustus rule? Yes, it is, because like you said, every dollar saved today, if I could even take that 600 or that 2,000 or that 12 grand, put it in right now, like go back to college. How many of us wish we would have invested at that point in time, $20 when we were in college into the stock market and what that would be worth today? I think that there's just value in being strategic and smart, and this is how you build wealth. It's not sexy, but if you do it consistently, you will exponentially become wealthier much faster than otherwise. I think it's the fastest way to get to wealth long term, because you've got a runway in front of you.
Well, and I'm going to throw something out here, Kiera, because I get to see behind the scenes, right? I work with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of successful dentists, and dentists have a really good income. Dentists generally are not great at creating wealth. I'll just
I
be
would
totally
agree.
honest with you. A lot of them, they make enough money that uh, they can spend and they have a good life and they're able to put some money away, but proportional to their income, a lot of them are not great savers because of exactly what you talked about. A lot of them make all this money, but they got to pay off a lot of debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Student loans and a business loan. Well, that's a lot of cash flow, especially in the first 5 years, going out a lot of people's pockets. So a lot of times I'll see a dentist and they're making, let's say they're taking home $500,000, which is very common. Um, but you look at their investments and everything, and they've got 300 grand saved, and
Mm-hmm.
they've been at it for 10 years. And you're like, what happened? And it's they paid off student loans, they paid off business debt, they've had to invest in equipment along the way, they've had to remodel their office, they bought a house, and they have some nice things. But now when you start going back and saying, hey, we can do this, this, and this, and now you get to save an extra, let's go really, really low, an extra $20,000 a year. Okay. I did some math the other day for our newsletter. $20,000 a year, if that's what someone saved, and they just put that money to work at 7%, over 30 years, they'd have $2.1 million roughly. Right. So it's like, it doesn't appear to be a huge thing, but over time, it really does add up. And to be quite honest, someone who makes $500,000, I can think of a bunch of ways that are outside of the new tax bill, things we've been doing for years that can really save them a whole lot more than that. So for a lot of people, like if somebody's making $2.5 million, there's actually some advanced strategies that can really move the needle in a big, big way. But these small things like paying your state tax by the end of the year, it takes you 5 minutes and you saved
Mm-hmm.
13 grand. Okay, that's a big deal. Making sure you're paying yourself properly so that you don't end up paying self-employment tax unnecessarily on more of your income than you. Okay, that's another 7, 10, 15, 20 grand. Paying your kids, Augusta rule, bonus depreciation. Okay, now all of a sudden we took a bill that was maybe 120,000 of taxes for someone who makes 500 grand, and now they're paying 50. So they kept
Mm-hmm.
70,000. Like that's a big deal. You put
Mm-hmm.
that together, and using the math I just did there, that's about $5 million over 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's significant. And I bring up the 2.5 million thing because I don't see a lot of dentists. I have a few clients that make that kind of money, but most of the dentists, especially people who own one or two practices, they're making between, on the lower end, maybe 300, 350, on the higher
I
end,
agree.
maybe 8, 900,000, so suddenly an extra 50, 70, 80, $100,000 a year it's a lot of money.
I
It makes a
agree.
really big difference.
I even think though, like on no matter where your bracket is, I think like, well, one, I just hope, I don't know, Derick, I need to surround myself with people like this. I hope that no matter what income I make, I don't ever like pish posh 70 grand. Like, I just hope. I hope I never, I mean, I hope that I'm a freaking billionaire at one point in my life. Like, that'd be incredible. And like the amount of good that we'll be able to do in this world, like even today.
Sure.
But I'm like, I hope that I stay humble and grateful enough that I would never say, like, 20 grand or 50 grand is not worth my time to do in a small effort.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's just a zone of like, let's remember the humility as well of like, yes, these things are tax savings, but they're also going to exponentially grow your practice, your family, like your contribution, your good that you're able to do in this world. So even if you're not using it for yourself, think of the good that you can give back to this community in this world. So I think, and then I'm also like, yeah, and if you're at 300, 70 grand is a lot. If you're at 900, 70 grand should still be a lot. If you're at 2.5 million, 70 grand should still be a lot for you. To where I think like, I also feel it's a skill of staying sharp rather than getting lazy and sloppy as we evolve. And I know I've done it. Like I used to be way more scrappy when I first started the company. And I'm like, yeah, well, do we really have to do all this? And it's like, but I think the sharper we can keep ourselves and the more disciplined we can to be expert savers. Like I talk to Ryan Isaac of Dentist Advisors often.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I talk about like the biggest thing is like being a great saver, like building your wealth, but then also not
Yep.
losing your wealth by doing dumb things or not being disciplined and watching what you've built. Like it's kind of two sides of the coin, and being able to get there at the end of the day, I think is
Yeah.
what we're all striving for. So I think it's
Yeah.
brilliant. And I hope that nobody says pish posh to 70 grand if we could save you that much in taxes.
I sure hope not. Right. And if you do, it's because you've got a better use of your time than that. But quite frankly, most of this stuff, especially taxes, the cool thing is we've had a few tax rewrites in the last, 10 years or so. But typically we don't have a lot of tax rewrites. So once you know the rules, it doesn't change that much year to year. A few little things change here or there, but for the most part, if you can take the time, get yourself the right team or learn the rules yourself. I mean, I think even people who know how to do this themselves, having a good tax pro on your team can be worth a lot because things do come up. But honestly, most of it, once you know it, it doesn't take a lot of time, right? We're talking a couple hours a year. And if you know what you're doing, a lot of this you kind of do along the way, or it's already set up, like setting the money aside for taxes, that's already set up. Paying before the end of the year, that's just the thing you do one time. You write one check or make one payment online and you're done, right? And a lot of these things are easy. Another one that's a really big one that came up with the tax bill that I'm very excited about is they brought back the research and development credits. And
Mm-hmm.
this is another thing that for a dentist, it'll probably take you 2 hours of time to do it, like an hour to work with someone to do the projects, which is basically an interview of what have you done, what's the research, so that the tax team can look at that, and then just getting your tax returns over, because not only do these credits come back, but you can retroactively, we've got 1 year to do this. Retroactively, you can go back and claim the credits for 2022, 2023, and 2024.
Wow.
And so that gives us 3 years where you can amend and go back and get that money. And I mean, for a typical dentist, I see on the low end, a lot of them, if you're investing in equipment, trying new stuff, which most dentists to compete have to be doing today. If you're
Mm-hmm.
doing, still doing mercury fillings from the 70s, then maybe that's not you. But most people who are listening to your
I
podcast,
was gonna say most of the podcast community should be in that realm.
yeah, I'm kind of joking, but typically, I mean, it's between $10,000 and $20,000 a year. So if you have a big practice, I mean, we've had clients that have gotten multiple six figures back, but because they did some major overhauls and a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But let's call it 15 to 20 grand a year for a lot of dentists. It takes 45 minutes to do it, the interview, and then a little bit of time to review that, make sure it's good. So let's call it 2, maybe 3 hours of total time to get that money back, right? And you can do this every year when we amend. You have to amend them, and they go back to the IRS, and the IRS is taking about a year to get checks out. They're a little buried ever since COVID. They got
Mm-hmm.
behind and they just never caught back up. But once you get on top of that, for 2025 and beyond, like you can just do it proactively. You just don't pay the taxes. You don't have to wait for a refund. And so it's another one of those things where you spend an hour or two a year and you get 10, 15, 20, $30,000 a year that you just get to keep. Right.
It's
And
awesome.
so this one to me is a huge one for dentistry because the rate at which the industry is changing, right? Uh, went from cone beams to milling, people milling their own crowns. Now it's 3D printing. Pretty soon it's going to be, you know, a lot of these things you see at the shows with the robots doing things and all
Totally.
kinds of different things. That dentistry is a very progressive industry, right? A lot of AI coming in with answering phones and scheduling people and answering questions and all of that kind of stuff. You may as well get credits for it. You're doing the work, you're buying the equipment, you're figuring the stuff out. So if you're doing anything where you're upgrading, trying new technology, looking to get better, faster, more efficient, you're probably accruing the credits. And it's just something you don't want to miss out on. R&D credits are uh, not as well known as they could be
Hmm.
because it's very much a specialty thing and it's relatively new to the tax code. It only became permanent in 2015. It's been around since the 80s, but it changed a bunch and became permanent then. Um, and the reason we didn't do it through 2022 through 2024 was there was a change in the 2017 tax code. And, you know, they gave tax breaks to corporations. They had to make it up somewhere. And this was a place where they said, if people claim R&D, they also don't get to write off all the expenses. And without going into all the detail, it just wasn't worth doing.
Yeah.
Now we can go back and recover that. Like Congress didn't think it was even going to become a law. I think they thought they were going to amend it. And then COVID happened and they sort of forgot about it. So it became a law in 22. Anyway, this is all fixing it. So to me, this is a huge one. It's an easy win for a lot of dentists to be able to go out and just get a bunch of money back in taxes you've already paid for stuff you've
Yeah.
already done. And it's pretty minimal effort. There are a lot, you know, different people out there who do it. We do a free estimate for people so they can kind of see what's on the table. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. To me, that's probably the one specific to dentistry that's going to apply to almost everybody listening almost every year. And
Yeah.
so I kind of saved it toward the end here because I think it's the big win. You know, the others, the bonus depreciation can be bigger, but you're probably not buying a business or massive amounts of equipment every year. Um, but if you are, then that's going to be a huge one too.
Yeah. No, Derek, I love that. And I did some math because you talked about like 1 hour approximately per month to do these things. And I did some really, really conservative numbers. So I was like, if we were doing 20 grand of how much
Mm-hmm.
we get for tax savings of like actual dollars to you, and that was in 15 hours a year, that's 1333. So
Mm-hmm.
about 1400 per hour. And so thinking about a dentist who's producing 1400 per hour, that's a pretty high production. You're producing about $11,000 a day as a dentist at that
Mm-hmm.
rate. Then I was thinking like, okay, the R&D is 10 grand, 20 grand in 2 hours. That's now producing $10,000 an hour. I was like, that dentist would be producing $80,000 a day. Just to put in comparison of your dollar per hour on production, you apply that to your tax savings. I think that it's, to me, not all dentists are even producing $1,300 an hour. Even very, very skilled dentists, like 500 to 1,000 is actually pretty great. That's what we try to
Mm-hmm.
target for doctors to do.
Sure.
8,000 a day is a pretty good amount. So when I just did the quick math and I'm like, a lot of dentists are not working 5 days a week. A lot of you are working 4 days a week. So if you just added this as part of your CEO time, 1 hour per month to dedicate to this, um, what's the ROI of that time? I think it's very well worthwhile. And I will agree with you, Derek. We've had you on the podcast before. That's why I had you come back on, because I am seeing multiple clients get these R&D credits coming through, that I just think it's a worthwhile thing. Again, I feel like it's Geico. That's what I feel like right now. Like 1 hour or like one quick call could save you 10 to 20 grand. I think that to me, again, let's be sharp, let's be savvy, let's make sure we take advantage of these opportunities, because again, like you've said, the compound of that $10,000 or $20,000 that you get over the course of the next 20 to 30 years while you're doing dentistry, even if it's 5 years, even if it's 10 years, uh, that to me is so worth your time. I feel like that's the best use of your time you can possibly do as a CEO, as a business owner. So Derick, that's why I wanted you back on, because I think everybody should connect with you. Everybody should talk to their CPAs about this. I know you guys do the R&D credits. I also know that you guys do accounting. So if people are looking to connect with you, Derick, like what's the easiest way? Like, I'm fired up listening to this podcast. I'm committed to my 1 hour a month. It's like 1.5, guys. So you're gonna have to be a little bit more. But I'm committed to that. Where do I start? How do I get going to make sure that I can maximize this big, beautiful tax bill and also the R&D credits for my practice?
It's a great question. So we actually set up a page just for Dental A Team listeners, right? So it's just, my company's called Big Life Financial. And we do that. It's not big money financial. Our goal is to help you get money out of the way so you can live the life you're here to live as a human, right?
Yeah.
And really spend the family time and make the contributions and express yourself as you want to. But it's biglifefinancial.com/DAT. So if you go there, it's a research and development credits opt-in, right, for the page, because I think that's the biggest win. But we will also do, if you would like, a full 3-year tax review for people. Anybody who wants to see, have I been overpaying? There's a million things we didn't touch on today because they're not part of the new tax bill. They're things that have been around for a long time. But we can help you to get a good idea of, have you been overpaying and what are the opportunities out there? And so that's a great way to start. And then from there, if it seems like you want to find out more, you have questions or things come up, but that's a good starting point, right? It's like a diagnostic that gives us a good place to start from. So biglifefinancial.com/DAT. We'll set up a free call. It should only take maybe 15, 20 minutes at first, just to answer
15
any
or more
questions.
could save you.
That's right.
It really feels that, but it's true. It's true. Derick, I do have a question though, because people get creeped out by taxes.
Sure.
How often does doing this and looking back at past taxes alert audits within the IRS?
So
Because people
doing
creep out about this.
so the R&D credits, like especially this, because they literally passed a law and said, yes, you can go back and do it. So there's going to be a ton of people doing it. So I don't think it's going to be any type of audit unless you really weren't doing research, right? But that's what the interview's for, is to help us to identify it. And our team will essentially tell you what does and doesn't qualify. But there's no risk to it, especially because they're saying, hey, yeah, you can go back and do this. You could have claimed it before, but nobody did. So it's not going to stand out. And also, even in the past, when we've done this for people prior to that law change, I think out of 16,000 filings, there's been like maybe 12 or 15 audits. It's lower. It's even lower than a typical audit range. And I don't know how that's even really possible, but it's just been very low. It's not something the IRS is really worried about. It's not huge amounts of money. Some of these other strategies, Kiera, that you're aware of, like people are getting $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 tax
Right.
breaks, and those are much more highly scrutinized. You really doing this work, which dentists do, and based on your industry, I don't think they're really going to bat an eye. It doesn't mean there's a zero chance, but it's very, very low. Just like if you had a piece of equipment, forgot to depreciate it, now you went back and amended to do that. It's that straightforward. It's a permanent part of the tax code. It's not gray area stuff.
Which is super helpful. And that's just where I wanted to clarify, because I know people get kind of weird of like, yeah, I
Yeah.
want to save on my taxes, but I'd rather not get audited. And so I think this is a world where you can be both. You can save
Yep.
on taxes legally, just like the Augustus rule. Like that is something very common. People do it. If you don't know about it, talk to your CP about it.
Yep.
Your kids having real jobs.
Yep.
So I feel like it's something where, like you said, it's not talked about as much, but that does not mean that it is not as commonplace, or that you shouldn't bonus depreciation on real estate, on big equipment. Like these are things. And I also feel this is the time, like political landscape for you as a business owner to take advantage of tax benefits.
Yep.
The person who's in the White House currently, whatever you choose to believe or not believe, is very pro businesses in a lot of ways. And so I'm like, if you're ever going to try it, based on who's in office, I think now is a great time, with how many things are coming forward for businesses and being more business, I would just say business friendly, I think is
Mm-hmm.
where the political landscape is currently. Again, not to go down a political path, just to be looking at like, if I'm hedging my bets, now is probably a really good time where
Yeah.
odds of audits are probably a little bit lower than maybe at other times of the political landscape. So just things to think about. Derick, I love these podcasts. I love building wealth. So guys, go to biglifefinancial.com/DAT. So dental A team. So it's just DAT, our initials. And Derick will take great care of you. Derick, any last thoughts as we wrap up today? I appreciate you so much being on here.
No, I just think, dentists work really, really hard. And I feel like a lot of them don't get the fruits of their labor because there's a lot of these little things that they haven't been taught. And I think all the little things do add up. So, this is one of those things that if you choose to just take it on, figure it out in a year or two, you'll be way ahead of the game and you get to benefit from that basically forever, right? A lot of this stuff, once you figure it out one time, you can just ride 80%, 90% on autopilot. So if you've been afraid of it, I would say it's climb over that hill, whether it's with us or someone else. It is really worth it. You guys work too hard, take too many risks, deal with too much headache to not get the full amount of the money that you really deserve to keep. So
I
yeah.
agree. That's why Derick gets to be on the podcast, because we're very aligned. I've always said I want dentists to be insanely wealthy, I see what you go through in school. I mean, 2.5 million debt to even get the opportunity to practice. That's really where I was on a very strong mission to help dentists, just like Derick, to be as successful as you want to be. And there's little strategies like what we talked about that are big strategies. So take advantage, get over the hump, chat with Derick or your financial advisor or your CPA. But these things I think need to be part of your every single year conversations. They need to be talked about multiple times. You need to be asking what's been changing in the tax bill, keeping yourself a part of it. Very simple moves, big gains this year. Derick, as always, thanks for being a part of it. I really appreciate you. And for all of you listening, thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the Dental A Team podcast.